Good evening, Ty. Just checking before I go have dinner. Do you hear me?
I hear you, Jerry.
Okay, hope you're gonna have dinner too before the meeting.
I'm in the middle of it right now.
Oh, I'm sorry to have disturbed you. Go enjoy, and I'll see you at 6:30.
No problem at all. See you then.
Nice to see you, Mark.
Hello.
Hello, hello, Ariel, Mark, and Bob.
Hi, Jerry.
Oh, well, here we are again.
Yeah. So what else is new?
We really need more committee members.
Well,
I'm muting myself so I can babble quietly to myself.
okay. Ashley, did you present last week or whatever, last meeting? Is that why you look familiar?
Not last meeting, but I have
Well,
been
one of the meetings.
before the board before.
Yeah. Okay. Oops. Okay.
And also used to work for Steve Levin, so probably presented
right, yeah.
updates many years ago in that capacity.
Yeah, my phone's ringing in the background. I'm not answering it, but I want to mute. Sorry, Ashley, I just wanted to get the phone and stop ringing. You don't work for Steve Levin anymore?
Not for a while. I'm at Capolino.
Don't have fun. Are you here to present again? Or not? Okay, not on the committee then. I was trying to figure out.
Hi, everyone.
Who said what? Hi, Alec.
Hey, Bob.
Right.
Thank you.
So we'll give it a few more minutes till we get a quorum. At least we will aspire for a quorum. We usually have one, but
Alec, Eric, our transportation chair, is on the panel. Just wanted to be clear that he does not count towards a quorum.
absolutely. Yeah, I count 8, so we're just waiting on 2.
I think I have 9.
Oh, we have 9?
I think so.
Can't we just borrow him for the night?
I'm bringing Maddie over to the panel now. I'm not sure if that takes us there, but
I'm still counting 9, Glenn.
Yeah, the names keep moving around, so it's hard to get an accurate count.
Let's give it one more minute, then we have a busy agenda tonight, so we'll give it another minute, then we'll get started and just anticipate that we'll have a quorum by the time we're voting. Okay, why don't we get started? And welcome, everyone. My name is Alec, and I'm the co-chair of our land use committee here at Brooklyn CB6. If you're joining, we have three items tonight. The first item that we're going to get to is the 7728 Court Street application. Then we have two landmarks items that will follow it. And the way this usually works is that we hear a presentation from an applicant, and then there's discussion from committee members, ask questions. Then there's an opportunity for the public to weigh in. So if you're on that attendee side and you're wondering when you're going to get a chance to talk, it's after that process happens. And you'll use the raise hand function when you want to talk at that point. I'll let you know again, I'll remind you. Then we'll go back to the committee where the public session will be closed and we'll have a vote on whatever application we are considering at the moment. And the first application is an application to build in a mapped but unbuilt part of Clinton Street in Red Hook to facilitate the development of a logistics center. And so I will throw it to whoever. I know there's a big team here to make a presentation. I'll throw it to whoever will be leading. And of course, I know we've already mentioned this earlier today, but we appreciate all the efforts you can make to keep the presentation tight so we can have more time for questions and comments from the public.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alec. I'll take it, and then we're going to tag team. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Manson, and on behalf of the RXR and LBA teams, first, thanks for having us at your meeting, to the committee, the chair, and members of the public. I'm on the development team at RXR Realty, and I'm joined by my colleague, John Goldsmith at LBA Realty. We also have a couple of other folks on the line, Rebecca DeLoya from RXR, Ashley Thompson from Capilino, and then Melanie Myers and Lee Whitman from Fried Frank, who will speak a bit more to the technicalities of our application. We're here tonight to introduce ourselves and our project in the neighborhood, and also, as Alex said, to provide a specific overview about an application that's in front of the BSA. And with that, I'll turn it over to John to introduce himself and his company.
Great, if we can, pop it up to, perfect. Appreciate it. Thanks, Emma, and thanks for everybody's time tonight. As Emma said, my name is John Goldsmith. I'm here representing LBA Logistics, who's a partner in this project, and just wanted to give you all a quick background of our firm. We are a national owner, operator, and developer that's based in Irvine, California. We have about 10 offices around the country, including one in Kearney, New Jersey, from where I work with about a team of 12 people covering the Northeast region. Some of our projects are office properties that are concentrated on the West Coast, but in the past 15 years, we've really shifted heavily into the warehouse and industrial space, and you can see a couple images of the projects that are pictured here on the slide. And now we are a pretty significant owner of warehousing space in the country with over 82 million square feet in our portfolio. And I'd just like to highlight a couple things. One is we take our responsibilities as a corporate neighbor very, very seriously. Locally, we're involved with a number of hospital and food shelter initiatives in the region. On a macro level, we are at the forefront of what's called ESG initiatives, which is environmental, social, and governance standards for corporations and real estate owners. We're active with the Green Building Council and the White House Council for Environmental Quality, and we've been recognized the last few years by the EPA for our sustainability initiatives. On a more micro level, we do work closely with municipalities and tenants on all sorts of energy efficiency initiatives, and we'll look to incorporate as many of those strategies as possible into our projects, some of which might include solar, LED, EV charging, and green roofs. And then I'll just really finish by saying that sustainability and resiliency are really core principles of our firm and how we operate our portfolio. And finally, I'll say that LBA and RXR have been partners in this region for about 5 years. I'd like to think we have a really complementary expertise and shared values, and we're really excited about this opportunity to leverage our partnership here in Red Hook. So with that, I'll pass it back to Emma to do a little bigger overview of RXR and give you guys an outline in greater details to why we're here before you today.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so RXR is admittedly new to Red Hook, but we're a very long-time firm with a presence in the New York region, in the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan, as well as the suburbs surrounding New York City. We have about 30 million square feet of commercial properties and over 7,000 residential units, all primarily in the New York region, not on the residential side, focused on transit-oriented development. We really are involved in some of the most complicated and kind of transformative projects in the region, whether that's the JFK redevelopment or the Grand Central redevelopment with the Grand Hyatt. A little closer to home in Brooklyn, we're partnering with LIU on a transformation of their campus. And another picture here is just of Pier 57 on the waterfront. We think that this regional breadth and kind of diverse expertise gives us a unique perspective on our region and also on the potential for real estate projects to have an impact in their communities. We are very much guided by an ethos of doing good and doing well means doing better. And we're really proud of the kind of results and partnerships that led to. So one thing that we like to talk about a lot and are particularly excited about here is our initiatives on local hiring, jobs, and MWBE initiatives. But we're just as proud of the long-term relationships that we've built across the communities and neighborhoods where we work. On the next slide, consistent with that, we really would like the Red Hook community to know that in this development team, you're getting not just a new building in your neighborhood, but a development team that takes a very long-term view of our role in our communities and has a comprehensive vision for how we can be active members. And what that means for us is that across our portfolio and our company, we invest in initiatives and partnerships that strengthen the cities where we work. And we think of that in a pretty comprehensive way, from the types of projects that we work on to the ways that we as a company can support our community, to the ways we can create pathways to economic opportunities, both on our projects and more broadly, and then how we can be an advocate on an industry and civic level for the issues that we know affect New Yorkers most. So just to highlight a few things here, one example that I already mentioned was our JFK redevelopment, where we're partnering with the Port Authority on a redevelopment of Terminal 6 for JetBlue. And they're working closely with the Port Authority, JetBlue, and local communities to set incredibly ambitious local hiring and contracting goals, as well as a really robust engagement around how this can benefit the community. In terms of community support, we have always been committed to establishing meaningful and impactful partnerships with community organizations. This never became more important than during COVID, where we sort of conceptualized a program before COVID called RXR Volunteer that was really put to the test. And this is a platform where all members of the RXR community, whether they're employees, tenants, contractors, nonprofit affiliates, can provide pro bono skill sharing services on a platform. And to date, we've served over 400 small businesses, nonprofits, and local governments with everything from help on their PPP loan assistance from the federal government to tax filing, consulting, loan applications, technical assistance to nonprofits, et cetera. We also, it was very critical to us that we maintained full staff and employment and construction jobs throughout the last 2 years of pandemic dislocation. This was critical to our leadership and enabled us to support jobs and wages and economic activity in a really tough time for our region. When it comes to thinking about how our projects and our company more broadly can create pathways to opportunity, we think about this on a project level and also on a corporate level. On a project level, which we'll talk more about here, we are very committed to robust local hiring programs and MWBE hiring programs and are very proud of the experience and track record we've built there. We are really excited about the work that we've done with hiring and training partnerships, often with community partners, to make sure that we are preparing people to access jobs in the field. And that's true both on a immediate standpoint from our projects, but also in long-term pipelines where we focus on corporate internships and volunteering. I think finally, to echo John on sustainability, this is a key goal for us, and we're committed to the industry transition to zero carbon emissions. That comes through in our project design, and it also comes through in our advocacy, both for strong ESG goals and in how we approach our own portfolio. I think finally, our company, in particular leadership, takes a very active role in the conversation about New York City's future, whether that's civic participation, voting, vaccines, investment in public transportation and infrastructure. And I just want to underscore that this is how we think about our work and our role in the New York City ecosystem, and it's very much how we're approaching this project. Alec, I know that was a little long, so I'll speed it up and get to the application. That's who we are, but what are we actually doing here? So in December of last year, RXR and LBA acquired the former Buckeye Terminal, which was located at the dead end of Clinton and Court Streets. Many of you are probably familiar with it. If you were familiar with it, it looked very much as it does on the left-hand side here, which is an aerial from 2020. It was an active fuel oil terminal facility, fossil fuels and tanks. Prior to our acquisition, Buckeye decommissioned the site. They completed a remediation under DEC oversight, and they also demolished the obsolete terminal infrastructure. So if you've been by there recently, it looks pretty much as it does from this photo in August at the right. It's a clear site south of Bryant Street. The site, interestingly, includes a privately owned paper street that was never built. So this is a street that was always part of Buckeye's facility, enclosed in the facility, and not identifiable or intelligible from the street grid. This has been the condition for decades. As you can see from the images on the slide, the left-hand side is a pretty cool aerial from 1944 showing the prior use then. The street is outlined in red, roughly. And then the two images at right are that 2020 Google aerial, as well as a street view from July 2020, if you were walking by the site. The development plan that we're enacting is either 3 or 2 industrial buildings, depending on whether the project receives a BSA waiver enabling construction on that paper street. The first building in white on the right-hand side of this image is a building that does not require the waiver and for which we're in pre-construction right now. We're anticipating, thanks Ashley, starting construction for that in the summer and hiring for that this summer. The requested waiver would permit the project to build over the privately owned paper street that was part of the Buckeye facility. And this facilitates a 2-building program that's designed to optimize the site plan and the street connections and improve area congestion and traffic. Without the waiver, the site will have 3 buildings. In either case, the use and the maximum zoning floor area will remain the same. So in both the no waiver or the waiver scenario, there's no change to the permitted use on site or to the maximum zoning area. I think I'm going to turn it over to Lee from Fried Frank to get into the very specifics on the application.
Thank you, Emma. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to present our project tonight. My name is Lee Whitman, and I am an attorney at Fried Frank, Harris, Schreiber, and Jacobson. And I'm also joined by Melanie Myers, who is also an attorney at Fried Frank. We're a land use counsel to the applicant. Today, we are presenting 2 actions for your advisory review. The first is a waiver pursuant to Section 35 of the General City Law, and the second is a heightened setback waiver pursuant to Section 7201G of the Zoning Resolution. Together, these 2 actions will allow for development at the site as if the paper street were not mapped. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of these actions, and then if you have any more detailed questions, we're happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. The GCL 35 waiver is used in situations where there's been a long-standing mapped street on private property. This waiver will allow for construction in the bed of that mapped but privately owned street. In this case, the paper street is currently privately owned and actually has been for decades. And despite the fact that it's appeared on the city map since at least the 1800s. The paper street is currently unimproved and is not accessible to the public, and is the only property that adjoins the paper street is the proposed development site. The applicant, RXR LBA, is seeking approval pursuant to Section 35 of the General City Law to allow for construction within the bed of the unbuilt and privately owned paper street. In connection with this approval, the applicant is also seeking waivers of heightened setback requirements of Section 4343 of the Zoning Resolution. These waivers are pursuant to Section 7201G of the Zoning Resolution and go hand in hand with a waiver pursuant to Section 35 of the General City Law. They allow for the application of bulk regulations as if the privately owned mapped street were not mapped. Specifically, for our project, we're requesting a waiver of the heightened setback controls measured from the paper street only. So that means only the heightened setback measured from the Clinton Street prolongation. All of the other bulk controls for the site will apply. These include bulk regulations measured from the mapped and improved streets adjoining the site. So that includes Bryant Street, Court Street, and a small portion of Clinton Street that is located within the intersection with Bryant Street. And most importantly, these waivers are not going to change the overall zoning floor area at the site or the uses at the site. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. And then we know the BSA application itself can be dry stuff, so we just wanted to wrap up by talking a bit about our project approach. here, our goal is very much to deliver a modern, resilient building that's prepared for the future of industrial and logistics with strong connections to the Red Hook community. And I think we'd like to highlight 4 elements that also have been informed by some conversations that we've already had with members of the community and have been really helpful. So the first is that this is a new 21st century industrial building. It's in a historic industrial zone and maintains the commercial and job creating use, but it's designed to be prepared for the world that we live in now. So it's a redevelopment of a legacy industrial site, and in fact, a fossil fuel site, into a modern building. It has a high performance building envelope and brand new and highly efficient building systems. All of the critical infrastructure is elevated out of the floodplain. We're preparing for electric vehicle charging, and we're also exploring rooftop solar and other renewable energy generation. The second key pillar here is that we want to optimize the site plan and configuration so that this building integrates better into the neighborhood that surrounds it. As Lee just went over, the Section 35 waiver will enable an optimized site plan without changing the maximum zoning floor area or permitted use. But what it will do is permit us to deliver 2 rather than 3 buildings on the total site. And what this does is optimizes the site circulation and loading and reduces the choke points on streets that create congestion and idling on public streets. We want to highlight 3 attributes of the waiver site plan. The first is that it reduces the number of connections to the street grid. So opportunities for trucks to get stuck behind each other, turn, wait, idle, etc. The second is that the building layout optimizes the ratio of loading to warehouse space with a more efficient interior floor plate, which facilitates more efficient movement on and off the site. The third is that it enables entirely above grade and off-street loading areas, which we understand has been an issue elsewhere in the neighborhood, but here all of that loading takes place on the upper floors of the building. So it's trucks entering the building from a limited number of entry points and immediately going up where they unload to a floor that can actually sustain that throughput. The next thing we highlight is we want this to be a building that is designed for the future and is designed to be flexible enough to accommodate future changes in the logistics and industrial industry. We're pursuing a design that has the potential to accommodate changes in how buildings are parked and energy, like renewables. And we're also very aware of and share this community's strong interest in waterborne freight and logistics. From the moment we started looking at this site, we were struck by its obvious, incredible waterfront location and know that it has high potential for future uses, building on its very long waterfront history. We have been actively engaging with many of the owners, operators, and innovators in this space, as well as some public entities, in order to evaluate the site's blue logistics opportunities, and are really excited to be continuing this conversation and diligence. The third thing we highlight is that this is a job creating use in Red Hook, and we are very, very excited to make sure that as many of those jobs as possible are local. A typical project of this size creates hundreds of construction and permanent jobs. And we are anticipating starting to hire this summer for the first building on the site. So to clarify, not the building subject to the waiver application, but the one that we're in pre-construction for right now. We are very eager to work with the Red Hook community and the community board's 6 members and community to connect our neighbors to these jobs. And those are construction jobs most immediately, but as this advances and as we identify tenants, we also intend to build on those connections to work with the community for longer term partnerships and to help connect our tenants to the people who live and work here. I think we'd end by throwing out a few more specific examples of how we're thinking about this and food for thought for further conversation. We have several long-standing successful initiatives that we employ on every project and look forward to working on here. But they're really a starting point for conversations and further collaboration with the Red Hook community. The first is minority and women-owned businesses and local hiring. On all of our projects, we work with our contractors and project team to achieve strong MWBE and local hiring goals. We're incredibly proud of our recent projects, which have achieved over 55% of MWBE workforce participation and over 20% of local workforce participation. We've already started having some conversations with nonprofits and groups in the community and are really excited to do further outreach here starting this summer. We are also very committed to MWBE contracting to ensure that both jobs and capital are flowing to the communities where we work. And again, on on recent projects, my apologies, we've achieved over 15% of trade costs awarded to MWB owned firms. We frame these always as outcomes that we're proud of, but we're always striving to do better and improve. And we think there's huge opportunity on this project. The final thing is that we always seek to build recruitment and training partnerships with local nonprofits and institutions to train and recruit workers. And some examples of what we've done on prior projects include local recruitment and interview prep, providing OSHA and site safety training so people can get the credentials they need to work on this and other jobs in the future, and construction skills training and certifications like electrical and plumbing certs. Again, we take these as a starting point for future collaboration, but we did want to get this percolating in the ether as we start working on our first project, this building, and our long participation in this community. So with that, thank you very much for your time. I know we ran a little long, but we'd love to answer any questions.
Thank you. Can we, for now, end the shared screen? We might need it again, but now we can see each other. So I know there are going to be a lot of questions. I want to start by asking one question, if the committee won't mind, which is, I think what's going to be top of mind for a lot of people is some of the negative neighborhood repercussions that people have experienced from last mile facilities. And they're going to think, are we really doing anything to help another last mile facility in Red Hook at a time when I think it may not be the fault of any one participant in the industry? We understand there are big dynamics at play here, but where government at all levels has failed to deal with some of these negative externalities. So, what would you say to someone who was thinking, the last thing we need is another facility like this, and I'm inclined to vote against the application simply to maybe throw up a stumbling block to yet another facility like this?
Yeah, thanks, Alec. And I think on behalf of the entire team, we definitely understand and have heard a lot of that feedback, both from direct conversations and others, and certainly understand the community's perspective and why there is frustration. What I would say right now is that the reason we've submitted this application is to improve a project that would otherwise be 3 new buildings, but has the potential to be 2. Our goal here is improving a building or improving a project from the perspective of its relationship to the streets and the community. And in so doing, addressing some of the concerns, particularly around congestion and area traffic. The BSA waiver, narrowly put, is between a 3-building program without the waiver or a 2-building program. It doesn't relate to use, and it doesn't relate to the maximum zoning floor area. And then what I would just say is we really do come here as a development team that sees itself as long-term partners in the community and wants to work productively together to address some of the challenges with, that have historically been present with this use.
Okay, I have a number of other questions, but I'll try to bat clean up after the committee. So let's go Bob, then Allison, then Jerry, then Mark.
Talked about or mentioned the waterfront history. This is an area of a small streets, not easily able to handle 40-foot, 50-foot trucks coming in. And you've got this huge waterfront, as you say, it's a waterfront history, but there's no ability to use it from what I can see. In fact, you've done everything you can to not use it in the future. Is there any reason for that? Why not at least try to plan that maybe you can use it for water deliveries and take some of the big trucks out and only go out of there with the smaller trucks?
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate the question. We are trying to plan for future waterfront deliveries. We have had a number of conversations to date with EDC, with the folks at Red Hook Container Terminal and Hughes Marine, with some operators in California who are doing interesting waterborne stuff. We, think there's a lot of opportunity here and a lot of ways in which what we're developing can permit for future waterfront use, either by use of the pier, by cranes on the waterfront side of the Gowanus itself, by employing future roll-on, roll-off technology. What we're trying to do is make the site as flexible as possible, both for today's users and for tenants who want to explore waterfront in the future. But it is not at all our intent to preclude that use. I think the site itself allows for a substantial amount of internal circulation within the building and within the footprint that would still be viable and attractive to a waterfront tenant. And we are very actively looking into ways that this might work both today and in the long term.
How would the building specifically be changed to treat waterfront? I mean, you got a flat one front, smooth front. I mean, it doesn't seem to agree with what you've said when you look at that building.
Some of these design features would be in conjunction with a tenant, and we are currently developing this on spec. And as we have conversations with further tenants, we'll be able to incorporate some of their feedback. The site includes the finger pier out into the Gowanus, which is available for loading. The building on the Gowanus front side, you're correct that as a multi-story facility, there's obviously a fairly extensive wall. It's accessible from the ground level and could be made more so. The entire ground level in the current concept is actually open. But I think, the point here is that there's still substantial flexibility even within this building design for a future user. And it's in our interest to make sure that it remains that flexible, because we do know that this is part of the future, right? It's part of the Brooklyn's waterfront past and historic past and the city's past. But we are a waterfront city and this is a waterfront neighborhood, and we would, quite frankly, be short-sighted to not try and make it work.
Gary? Oh, I skipped you, Allison. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I appreciate everything that that was presented in terms of the how you work with communities and the work that you've done, and the fact that you try to be a positive corporate neighbor. However, I just don't really see, from my point of view and from the community's point of view, or at least the people that I know in the community, it's there's too many of these facilities, and our city government has completely abandoned any oversight over them, and has kind of refused to monitor, even like acknowledge that it's a problem, much less like address the problem. And so I feel like this really becomes like an environmental justice issue. And Red Hook is a neighborhood with a very like a majority population that is very vulnerable, both economically and racially, and in many ways. And for example, the citywide childhood asthma rate is about 10%. In Red Hook, it's 25%. So I think to bring a business and multiple businesses into the neighborhood that rely on truck traffic is kind of unconscionable. And given what what we know about the health impacts. And so I just want to know how you are, and how I know you're just the developer, so I don't. To me, it doesn't really I don't know how much sway you're going to have with your ultimate tenant, right? So if you have a tenant that is using diesel trucks, I don't know what you're going to be able to do about it, even though you say that you want to use electric trucks and waterborne transport and everything. But ultimately, it's the tenant that that you use or that you lease to is going to control what happens on the site. So I just can you answer some of those questions?
I can certainly try, and I really sincerely do appreciate that perspective. We know that this is a broader conversation. It's not just about our site, and we are entering a neighborhood and a community where there are other facilities of this type, and that conversation has not necessarily been had at the level it needs to be. So we are here today. We look forward to being part of that conversation and participating in, future kind of work with our fellow developers, with the city, with the community. And that's really going to be critical here for many of the issues you've raised. I think your question about how we can get tenants to be better is a great one. And full disclosure, it's of course a challenging one. I think we think about it in a couple of ways. The first is we need to design a building that makes it easy for tenants to do the right thing. And we are trying to do that here in a couple of ways. The first by incorporating, building systems, high efficiency envelope, renewable and kind of low, I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to mumble this, but basically low fixture rates, good building materials. And then we're also preparing it for the future of transportation with electric vehicle prep, which is huge. It makes it easier for tenants to make the choice to have an electric fleet. If and when they want to make that choice in the future, if they don't have it now, there will be infrastructure in place that makes it easy for them to do that. I think across our commercial portfolio in particular, we've done a good job with our tenants of putting building systems in place to monitor emissions and to monitor their energy usage. And I can see us doing similar things here. A lot of what we do, and the reason that I, quite frankly, spent so much time up front talking about how we approach projects, is try to lead by example, but also give people the tools to make the right decisions. And ultimately also to show up and be present and have the tough conversations.
Okay, I appreciate that, and thank you for responding. I just, obviously this is a larger conversation than what you're here for in terms of the BSA, variance, but there really is no platform for anybody in the community to kind of talk about this. And so this is it. So, I think people are going to kind of take advantage of it. For me, the big problem in the plan is that, ultimately it's going to be whoever the leaser, the leasee, or the user is in your building that's going to determine whether they're good neighbors or not. And we have no idea who that is. So, it's kind of like a shot in the dark right now. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jerry, you're next this time.
Okay, excuse me. I'm not sure where to start because I have hundreds of questions. But as a developer and someone who will be renting the space, I find it interesting that you talked about a community outreach, community commitment, community jobs, when you won't be controlling any of that, because your tenants will be controlling that. So to tell us what you did in California or anywhere else is immaterial, unless you own the building and unless you are actually the tenant who's working it. So I think that was slightly misleading. You talked about the finger pier, but you didn't tell us, and I'm not sure you did any engineering work on it, can that finger pier sustain a dock, a roll-off for ro-ro vessels? Is it wide enough? Is it deep enough? A commitment to future marine delivery of whatever product your tenants decide to have without knowing if it's really practical is a problem. You can't control that. You're just giving us what ifs and maybes. You talk about 2 buildings instead of 3. If we have 2 buildings, are we going to have less trucks? We'll have the same amount of space. We won't have any more trucks or any fewer trucks than with 3 buildings. The only thing that you will have is the convenience of 1 large building, and with nothing to the community. You have done no outreach to the community organizations as far as employment is concerned for the future, because you can't. You're not the ultimate user. You're the developer. So I really have a problem with this And I won't even get to that it's the umpty-ump last mile warehouse. And you have no control of how the trucks will get in and out from a transportation point of view, let alone if they're diesel or gas or electric. It's nice that you're planning on electric, but planning on electric doesn't mean that your tenants will want to have electric trucks, assuming that the industry will have enough of the type of trucks, electric trucks, that your tenants need. So I'm a bit apprehensive about this, and showing us the drawings. I'm not sure that we could tie you to the drawings and exactly the building, the way the building is going to look. But I have also some problems with the fact that you want to go as high as you want, according to your application. That's a very large building, even without the exceptions that you're asking for within the roadbed. I see nothing right now that would induce me to say, hey, this makes sense. In an isolate, if there wouldn't be anything else in Red Hook, it might make sense. But at the moment, with everything else that's here, with Amazon in at least 3 locations, one of them already working and causing traffic problems, even without trucks, just private cars on Bay Street. I don't see what this is. It's like buying a pig in a poke. We don't know who you're going to rent to. We don't know what they're going to be doing. And we don't know who they're going to be hiring. We have a large corporation here that when they came in, spent 6 months doing an outreach to the community as to hire, who to hire, and so on. You can't do that because you're not the tenant. So telling us what everything you've done to me right now is what you want is permission to put up this huge building to function as a last mile warehouse, and you will rent it to X, Y, and Z, or maybe just X. Maybe it'll be another Amazon facility or something like Amazon. We'll have no control. We'll have nothing to say. You'll have your variance. So I don't have any questions as such. Can you answer? I'm saying you haven't given me a reason to vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Alec, I would like to address.
I want to give you an opportunity to respond. Yeah.
And Jerry, thank you for that. I think I'll try and take these in order, but please let me know if I miss anything. So the first to jobs and what we can do as a landlord. The first answer is we can do quite a lot when it comes to construction jobs, and the programs that I've talked about in depth and the ones that we're trying to set up relate directly to the hundreds of construction jobs that RXR and LBA will directly control when we build the building. So to give a concrete sense of how this has worked on other projects, at a project in Long Island City, we set up a partnership with a local nonprofit to do recruitment and training and then interview prep. And we had our construction crew interview locally. That was a requirement. They interviewed them. We worked with a local nonprofit to provide OSHA certification for people in the program. We provided training through local academic institutions that provided transferable skills. We've done a similar thing on a recent industrial project working with by the numbers and non-traditional employment for women, where we've set up specific training programs for people who are underrepresented in the construction trades who lived in the neighborhood to work on a project. And those are the types of things that we are very eager to work on here and that we have a very immediate need because we're going to be hiring on one project in the fall, this summer, I apologize. You bring up the really tough point about commercial development, which is that as a landlord, and admittedly, we're going to be a long-term owner. That's how RXR and LBA operate. We will be the landlord in a neighborhood. You will talk to us. Admittedly, right now, we don't have a tenant. So you're right that it is hard to talk about what a tenant will do and how they'll hire. We, on our projects, and we would expect to do this here, want to have our tenants understand the value of hiring locally and creating jobs. And I think by building on the types of connections that we hope to have through the construction process and outreach, we'll be able to do that and be convincing. But when it comes to jobs, you know, there is both an immediate and directly controlled opportunity here, and then an opportunity to build longer term connections with whoever the final tenant is. And to do the work to build programs and partnerships with local institutions that are prepared for those jobs. The second point I think you made was about the finger pier and the viability of waterfront infrastructure. So today, the site's waterfront infrastructure is fully functional. We do expect, and Buckeye had been using the pier as the Vane Brothers bunkering line does to make waterfront deliveries. It's fairly wide. It can support the kind of modern age ro-ro technology. It is very likely that for a tenant doing substantial waterfront use, we would need to make additional improvements to the waterfront infrastructure solely to have it accommodate those types of uses. I think your next point was about the 2 buildings rather than 3 and the trucks. And I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that these are 2 industrial projects of a very similar size that will generate, in all likelihood, the same order of magnitude of trucks. The difference is really how they interact with the neighborhood. And the 2 building plan has a couple of advantages, both on the topics that you discussed and actually something that Allison brought up, which is that it enables more internal circulation throughout the building without getting stuck or idling on the street grid. So there's a better opportunity for trucks to move throughout the building and not get stuck on the streets surrounding the neighborhood. There is a more, fewer opportunities for traffic choke points. And then it also enables us to bring all the loading up and out of the building, which contributes to those 2 benefits by keeping trucks off the streets and not using streets for loading, idling, movement of goods, or traffic jams. I think the 3rd or 4th point that you made was about height. And I also just wanted to clarify, but Melanie and Lee can probably jump in and correct me if even more technical language. This waiver does not change the existing height and setback regulations for the district. The BSA waiver really applies to the permission to build in the bed of a privately owned mapped street, and then applies the existing height and setback. So the height of the project is not a function of our request today.
Okay. I think you've answered or commented on each of my comments. Let me just say, if you're planning to build and start building on that 1 building this summer, I would have thought you would have done some outreach to the community organizations already about jobs, and I didn't hear anything about that. And yes, you're right, but what I said was not so much in the street mapped roadbed is good. I said the building itself is very large. And my point is it's cumulative. As I said, if this would be the only one, that's one thing. But again, there's no control over who you rent to. There's no control where their trucks are going, how their trucks come in. Once they get into your facility, you're right. One building might be better than 2. May not be, depending on the tenant. But all that aside, they have to come into your building from the city streets. How are they going to get there? I didn't hear anything on that. And again, you can't control that at the moment. So I'm still in sort of leaning. I'm not sure where I'm leaning, but I don't see the advantage of this. I think it's a great scheme for the developer. And I credit them with putting a lovely site together, or being aware of what Buckeye was doing and what didn't do. But I still have a problem with the project. So thank you.
Jerry, let's go to Mark. Mark, you're muted. There you are.
Okay. Thank you for coming. I'm not looking to punish anybody because I hate the idea of yet one more facility, because I think you're going to build the facility anyway. And if this is actually a more efficient and better use of the space, then perhaps it's better for the neighborhood. I don't know. When you talk about construction jobs, you haven't actually offered up how you're going to provide them, where you're going to provide them, how many there'll be. And you haven't said that you'd use any local construction firms. We have a lot of local construction firms, many in Red Hook, and they already have local employees, and you can use them, and you haven't talked about that. Your whole initial presentation, part of your presentation, was all filled with lovely buzzwords. Every word you said was what made me feel good, but had nothing to do with the application. The application has to do with whether or not you're going to build on this unmapped street. The advantages of building that unmapped street to you are probably very good. What you'll do for the community, you've talked in future terms, but nothing in terms of present terms. So I would like to hear what you have to say about that, and I'd like to know what you call high performance construction for commercial structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I might actually ride on your coattails to ask a favor. We are looking to hire and also looking to do local contracting. So I think Ashley might reach out to you to get more information. We are, early in the pre-construction phase for that project. Again, we're starting in the summer. We are just starting to ramp up our hiring and our contracting. As I think you saw in the presentation, we are very proud of having achieved pretty robust local hiring and contracting goals in the industry. And we hope to achieve those on this project. So we are very much looking to hire locally in Red Hook. We are looking to subcontract locally in Red Hook. And I think the reason that you haven't heard about it yet is just because we're a little in advance of it actually happening. I apologize because I forget what the second part of your question was, and I want to make sure I answer it.
That's okay. I do know Ashley. I'll be happy to talk to Ashley.
Yeah.
Really, it is. I asked about what a high performance facility was, and basically I want to be convinced that closing this street is a benefit not just for you but for the community. And if it's only a minor benefit to the community, what else you can do up front now for the community?
Got it. Thank you. So as to a high performance building, to make sure I don't forget that a second time, I think there are a couple of aspects here. The first is that we're replacing a kind of legacy 20th century fossil fuel terminal with a building designed and built in 2022, which means that we're going to have kind of building systems from our MEP ventilation, water, kind of filtration systems that are up to date and best in class. We're going to have a building envelope that performs very well on heat transfer and heat exchange. Actually, another benefit of having a single building versus two on that site is that we can reduce the building envelope and therefore reduce some of the emissions. It means that we're going to have, new glass. We're going to have kind of loading facilities that are designed to actually reflect how people load rather than legacy facilities that require people to move in and out on the street. But it's sort of the whole package. It's, we're also using fewer building materials and waste because if we are able to consolidate this into one building rather than two, because there's some inefficiency in doing two separate constructions. There's also some inefficiency on timeline. It'll likely be a longer construction timeline period with two buildings. So that's the building efficiency in a nutshell. The second question, I'm so sorry, was, the street. So the first thing that I would say to that is just a clarification. This street has never been open. It is a street in name only. It's kind of an oddity of the city map. And a great piece of New York City history. But for decades, going back long before Buckeye and Hess's ownership, it was enclosed and fully used as part of this site. What we're seeking to do is really to formalize a condition that's been the case in the neighborhood for decades. The street, Clinton Street, has always dead-ended in the site. A resident of Red Hook was never able to drive into it, walk onto it, and what would really, in some ways, the no waiver condition would be the bigger change there. I would just return to the benefits again. which are by having a single consolidated building, we really are intending to remove traffic from the area streets and to remove the logistics, circulation, and kind of loading activities and their related delays that are currently taking place in Red Hook, and hopefully reduce idling and some of the emissions related to that truck traffic. And we're able to accomplish this by making use of the existing condition, the enclosed street on the site, because it gives us a consolidated area on the site where we can bring in all the traffic, have all the trucks move up the building, and have all of those activities take place within the building rather than needing to use outside circulation. And that's the big benefit. And we do think that it's a significant improvement over the plan with no waiver and an improvement for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, let's go Van and then Maddie.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I want to bring that kind of a perspective that I don't think gets mentioned a lot. So I indirectly or directly benefit a lot from last mile services because I have a disability, and ordering things delivered to me same day, within an hour or within hours is something that helps me a lot. But that being said, I don't live in Red Hook, and I'm privileged enough to be able to afford to have things delivered to me on demand or close to on demand. So my question to you is, are you as a company working with groups or organizations, nonprofits in the Red Hook community on how to leverage last mile services to benefit Red Hook itself, as opposed to just helping people like me who don't live in Red Hook?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. The answer is that we are early in conversations and we want to be having more of them. And this is absolutely something that we want to do. So since we acquired the site in December, we've had a number of conversations locally with some nonprofits, with the NYCHA tenants associations, and to start thinking about, because the way we work is, I've talked a lot about the things that we know and are very good at that pertain to development and construction, where we have expertise and we know that we want to do them on this project. We never walk into a community and say we know what the right thing to do is or what the priorities and initiatives are and who to work with. And right now we are very much in that part of the process, and we would like to speak to as many people as possible. So again, I'm going to put Ashley on the spot because if there are people at this meeting or on the panel who we have not spoken to yet, and we absolutely want to. But yes, our goal is absolutely that this is a project that benefits residents of Red Hook, both on the hiring and on a holistic basis.
Thank you, Van. Okay, Maddie, and then Jerry and Bob. And Jerry and Bob, let's keep it truncated so we can go to the public session and then.
No problem.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not going to go over anything that Jerry has said or that Mark has said or that Allison has said, because I agree with all of them on this. I live around the corner from where they're building one of these last mile warehouses. You can't get down the street and they're not even open yet. It's the construction people. They're parked on the sidewalks. They're parked in the street. You can't get past. I mean, it's a zoo. God knows what it's going to be when this one opens. Then there's another one just on the same block on Beard Street going down 2 more blocks, and then you turn the corner and there's another one. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. And the same thing, except for the Amazon one, we don't know who's coming in. And you haven't told us, you're going to get construction people and whatever, and they're going to be parked all over the place too. And bringing in what do you call it? More bad air. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Maddie. Jerry?
Emma, you mentioned something when you answered Mark's questions and also with Van. you said that the two building plan would reduce truck traffic on local streets. You didn't present anything, that any traffic study and any then future traffic study that would say that. So do you have that? I mean, you made the statement, now I want to see the data. Maybe you're right. I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt here by saying you made the statement. How do you back it up? Can you back it up?
Thanks, Jerry. The sort of premise here of the design and the work that we've done with our engineers is that by reducing the connections to the street grid and moving the operations of trucks within the building on a controlled and consolidated site, that you're reducing the opportunities for traffic to cross each other, for trucks to get delayed while they wait for loading, and for all of those delays to rebound into the neighborhood.
But
Jerry, I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
But with Buckeye gone already, the traffic, the current level of traffic and backups in that neighborhood has been reduced. So I want to know, what will the two building plan actually reduce? It'll reduce the traffic in that little spot, but you said to reduce it on local streets, which meant more than just around the your project. And I have to say that I'm probably the only one on the committee who's actually driven on that unmapped street, having been to the Buckeye Terminal a number of times. But that's beside the
Good
point.
fact.
You're
Yeah.
right. It's totally unmapped, undeveloped. You can fill in after the word "un," you can fill in anything you want. That is definitely that street.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, Bob?
Yeah, I understand, and this is more for the community, the people that are here. We're not here to vote for whether or not we want this building or not. This building can go up as of right, or not this building, but 3 buildings could instead of 2. So what you're here for is to get permission to take the city or unmap the city, the street. And you also, when I asked the question about using waterfront, you left it very open, and rightfully so, because you don't know who your tenants are, whether or not the tenant is going to be able to do it. But if you have a building there without any conveniences for that, it's going to be expensive to do, instead of the owner building those to begin with, which is you, the developer. So I can't vote for this change unless I know that you have something, either you have a tenant already that you've worked on, or that you are going to leave it. For instance, you're going to set up an access to that waterfront, to that pier, actually have something set up that is built for that to begin with, so that if you were giving you a street, you can give us a waterfront that's usable. Otherwise, all we're doing is giving you more space. There's not much of an answer to that. You've answered the first time around, but I just, that's all.
Eric?
Thanks, Alec. Appreciate the opportunity to weigh in. I think my colleagues on the land use committee have put it well before me. I think Allison and Jerry especially. If you guys were coming to us 5 years ago for this, it would seem like a no-brainer. And unfortunately, there's late mover penalty when you already have a half dozen last mile facilities in operation or in the plans for the neighborhood. You guys talked a lot about sustainability in the way you work, and I appreciate that. But a last mile facility, the 7th last mile facility in the queue is really ultimately an unsustainable use for this neighborhood. If the eventual tenant were to go all electric, that's great from a emission standpoint, and I appreciate the idling benefits of the potential of 2 buildings rather than 3. But on the flip side of that, electric vehicles are heavier. They'll do more damage to the streets. The streets in the neighborhood are narrow. An electric truck is as dangerous to a pedestrian as an internal combustion engine operated powered truck is. I'm also, and again, you guys are doing what you do. You're developing real estate, and it's an as of right project. However, the assembly member and the council member representing the district both have legislation in the works at this point to try to get some control over the proliferation of last mile facilities. It would be great, and I know this is asking that probably impossible for you guys to go back and wait for that to happen. And obviously you don't want to do that because you want to get this project in the ground before you have to deal with those kind of legislative hurdles. So I do feel like the community board's between a rock and a hard place here, trying to make a Solomonic decision over an ultimately bad outcome, whether it's 2 buildings or 3 for the neighborhood because of the use. And I will echo, I think Bob or Jerry's statement about the absence of any kind of application regarding traffic and traffic study. And I know again that is not in the purview of why you are here, but it is of paramount concern to the community. And so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
And Alec, if I could respond to that just briefly, look, we're very aware that we're coming into a neighborhood with a lot of history and a lot of recent history with this use. And that this is a much broader conversation than just our project and just our facility. And really, I can only reiterate that we voluntarily applied for this waiver because we wanted to make the site better. And we think there was a real opportunity to do so. We intend and would like and need to be part of the conversations about the future of Red Hook and the future of traffic transportation in Red Hook. And we fully expect to be, and you know where to reach us. Thank you for your considered comments and for having us at the meeting, because I think we're happy to be having this conversation now. And Alec, I also just wanted to make one note because I realized I didn't pick up on it. To the comments, I think, Robert, this was in your last comment, that the city is giving up a street. The clarification I'd just like to make is that we own the street. It's a privately owned street that's been owned for decades, was never built, and just happens to be on a centuries-old map. So there is not a public street today that is serving the city or serving the citizens of Red Hook. But I very much take your point that we need to be really critical in how we're thinking about the waterfront and access to freight. And you've got that note.
Thank you. Okay, let's go Ariel, and then that'll be the end of the committee for a bit, and we'll go to public questions.
2 questions. My first question is, I guess, a follow-up to what you just described in terms of the private street. If it's privately owned, why do you need to be here? And if it's publicly owned, then everything we've talked about up till now holds, which is that we're giving you something and there should be something very clear in return to that. So I think the actual, I don't know, I didn't see it, but I didn't study every paper that was, every document that was posted, exactly how that ownership is detailed through deeds and through what the actual relationship to the public is that you have to come before us. That's my first question. But the second one is about the use. And you kept saying that regardless, it's the same bulk of use. For me, the buildings that were shown are built, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that bulk and that use. I mean, with that bulk, but the use is the thing you kept speaking about. The history of Red Hook, it's an M3 zone. Not that I want to bring back M3 uses all the way, but there are potentially other uses. You never spoke about uses in there. And I was sort of coming in knowing that this was I don't know, a lot of terminology is used, but What I'm not clear about is what you anticipate, and I'd like you to actually say that, because we keep talking about last mile warehouses, we keep talking about being big facilities where stuff is going to come in and go out. And is that exactly what you're planning for? Or have you considered other uses for a big building out there that wouldn't just be that?
Thanks, Ariel. I was smiling because I finally get to kick a question to Melanie, because that was definitely some land use specifics. So Melanie will take the first one and then I'll take the second.
So we'll start with the first one. Good evening, everyone. So the question about the streets, and is it a street, is it not a street? There is a document that is called the city map that identifies every street that was proposed to be part of the city. And if you look at the historic maps, you will see that that on this property, on the Buckeye Terminal site, that there was on the city map the intention for and there's a statement about that there being a street on this property. In order for it to become a street, the city would have had to decide to condemn the property, formally acquire the property, and turn it in and improve it as a street. And the expectation when it was originally mapped, which was back in the 19th century, I think it was in the 1880s, was that the city was going to acquire the property and improve it as a street. But they did not do that. The property was in private ownership at that point. And all these decades and centuries later, it continues to be in private ownership. And the reason for the Section 35 application is that at the moment, there's private property. It has an encumbrance on this property that was intended to be a street and never was, and the city never took the steps to make it a street. And so we're really in the situation that is precisely what was intended by the Section 35, was that if this property is not improved as a street, if the city doesn't acquire it after a certain amount of time, then the property can be developed by the owner of that property. Something that can happen after 10 years of it not being acquired by the city. Here we're asking for the privilege more than 100 years after it was originally created. So I hope that answers the question. It's clear it's in private ownership, and we have looked at that and spent a lot of time actually researching the background. Actually got the city involved, who agreed that the property, in fact, is in private ownership at this point.
Thanks, Melody. And then Ariel, to your second question about the use, what we're referring to here is two things. One, that the anticipated use for the project is consistent with existing zoning and fully permitted as of right. The building and the Buckeye Terminal is in a still industrial area of Red Hook. We are, as you noted, planning for a logistics use, so moving goods in and out of the building. Because we don't have a tenant right now, I can't tell you what that precise use is going to be or what their exact business model is. But it really could be anything. It could be food storage, it could be e-commerce, it could be, home improvement materials. It really depends on the tenants inside the building. John Goldsmith, I don't know if you wanted to shed any light on this as well from your perspective.
No, I'll just reiterate what you said, that the e-com users are kind of the most visible, but the variety and depth of users in these warehouses and facilities, do cover some of the tenants that you're talking about, Emma, of like traditional retailers and parcel carriers, restaurant delivery groups, medical supply delivery, consumer products. So anything that's in anyone's house and commercial business or office in the New York City and surrounding area is flowing through one of these warehouses within a couple of miles of Manhattan. So the depth and variety of users is pretty broad.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to public question, public comment. If you are attending this meeting and you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please use the raised hand function. Then we're going to do the thing where we move you over to the main panelist grid, and you can unmute yourself. So I see 2 hands raised right now. Ruben, and then Catherine Walsh, and now I see Jim, and now I see other people joining. So let's start with Ruben. Ty, could we promote Ruben?
Yeah, I just promoted Ruben. Ruben, please accept the promotion to the panel. And once you're on our side of the meeting, you can unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Ruben Colon. I'm an area standards representative for the New York City District Council of Carpenters. I'm also a Brooklynite, lifelong Brooklynite. I am a Sunset Parker. I grew up in Sunset Park. I currently sit on Community Board 11 here in Brooklyn as well. I too live near the waterfront, so I can understand and respect the community's concerns. I come with some information. I can't speak to LBA, but I can speak to RXR. RXR is among the more responsible developers in the community. That being said, I am concerned with their engagement of Hunter Roberts, who is a general contractor, only because Hunter Roberts, as of late, currently across the river, across the canal in Sunset Park, they are using East Coast Drilling New York, ECD New York. East Coast Drilling is known to be, to the trades, to the organized trades, to be a predatory contractor, a contractor that preys upon the fact that there are exploitable workers out there, often workers of color, who are being put in danger, who are being denied healthcare benefits. We all know the story of excluded workers and what they went through during the pandemic. And we are concerned that there are no labor standards being brought to the table. If Community Board 6 subcommittee can include some type of attachment that there be a discussion with organized labor. We have worked with RXR in the past successfully. We are the best at what we do. We are the safest at what we do. A dozen construction workers of color, often immigrant construction workers, die every year in New York City. It is a serious concern. As a person of color, I have to voice that concern, and we look forward to hearing from RXR with regard to how they intend to move forward. We have it under good authority that they will be using Hunter Roberts as the general contractor and East Coast Drilling to drive the piles. So those are our concerns. We are community stakeholders. We have over 100 carpenter families that live in the immediate area that could stand to benefit from responsible development, but it has to be just that, responsible development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ruben. And Emma, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. Ruben, thank you for your testimony and for your kind words about RXR. We take this extremely seriously. I know that you were speaking about a project that's not ours and across the Gowanus. So I don't know the specifics of that. That's not an RXR project. It's not an RXR team. On this project, we have the highest standards for labor and construction safety, and also will be, continuing our best practices for hiring on the project. And that's really all I can say at this time, but I really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you. Catherine, can we get Catherine up here?
Catherine, same thing. I've just promoted you to the panel. Once you're over, you can unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was just hearing an echo, but I'll deal with it. I am Catherine Walsh. I'm the chair of the special subcommittee on last mile trucking facilities at Community Board 7, which is Sunset Park, which is where the site that Ruben was just talking about, one of the massive last mile trucking facilities being developed of its kind in the country. We are, like Red Hook, very concerned about these last mile trucking facilities. We also have extremely high asthma rates. This is an environmental justice issue. I am very concerned in asking the Community Board 6 members, as you consider this variance, as you consider this waiver, to consider us in Sunset Park. and your neighbors in Gowanus and all the folks along the BQE. This decision is much larger than just the district, and I know you appreciate that. And I want to use an example that we have from a proposal that had come to us from Industry City, a massive development project to also look for variance on this sort of like demapping of a city street, which was the developer said was owned by, by them as private developers, and they wanted to establish further expansion and goals that they had. And it was a straw man that was set up. If you know what a straw man is, right, of course, it's around like setting up a proposal that, to Eric's point, you feel like you're hearing, you only have this option or that option. And that was what the developer tried to do with Industry City. They tried to set up a straw man that basically told us, if we didn't do this, this is what was going to happen. But that's not what happened. And that's what I want to really encourage Community Board 6 members. Don't fall into a straw man trap of thinking that, this is what you get and you get stuck with it. You actually do have an opportunity. You do have a voice. We never have a voice for these things. These are as of right. Show your values. You showed up with more than half of the people who came to our joint meeting in July of the Community Board 7, Community Board 6 last mile logistics meeting. It was largely Red Hook members. So here's a variance. Show your values. This is a major concern that you have. And I really want to invite you into thinking about what we learned from Industry City for Community Board 7, where we made our voice heard on that variance. The question that I have specifically for the developer is, you've talked about these different types of logistics uses. It could be medical, it could be Amazon, it could be, consumer goods. Have you considered any other development opportunities for this site that is not a massive logistics facility? I'm thinking about new development and investment that the city and the state is making on clean energy and the clean energy economy. Tell us about the other things that you've considered and why is it being set up that it just has to be this logistics facility or else? Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine. I would say that, we think the site is well positioned for a logistics facility. It's in a historic industrial neighborhood. It was a former distribution center, and it has this pretty unique location on the water. There is immense demand for this type of space in the city right now, as I think we all know, and many of us probably order from these types of companies. And it is a piece of infrastructure that is serving the city today. We, are excited about the tenants that we think we can bring here and about working with the Red Hook and the Sunset Park communities when we have those tenants identified. But I think the demand for this type of space in the market and the attributes of the site led us to this use.
Did you consider any other uses besides logistics? And what were those, and can you talk them through?
Our plan for the site was logistics use. We're continuing to work through that and identify different types of tenants. And I'd say one area that's been an interesting nuance is figuring out how we can make waterborne uses work, both from a tenant perspective and a design perspective.
Okay, but you're not answering the question. Did you consider any other uses besides logistics? You're kind of setting up the straw man of this is logistics or else. And
Thanks, Catherine.
2 buildings or 3 buildings. Did you consider anything else?
Yeah, Catherine, I think I agree that they haven't answered your question, but in the interests of keeping to our 3-minute limit, I'm going to call it here with your question not answered. Thank you. Okay, I see a Jim and a James, so I'm going to be clear that I'm calling on Jim first.
Jim, I just promoted you. You can unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
I'm trying to unmute. Okay, I did.
We hear you.
Okay, so I mean, one thing Emma you didn't mention was at this point, you're looking to build 2 buildings, the one white building on the water and the other larger building. Instead of the 2 buildings, you didn't mention how many square feet they're going to be. I understand that the one larger building that you wanted to put up is going to be 1.1 million square feet, which is going to be a larger facility than all 3 Amazon sites that are currently under construction and the third one that's already built. So, I mean, just so you understand, the neighborhood is kind of shell-shocked with these 3 Amazon sites, with all the traffic that's going to be generated. You're going to be sharing the same 2 small streets, which are going to be Clinton Street and Court Street, coming into your facility, which Clinton Street goes by the post office, it goes by the public parks, public housing. It narrows down to 1 lane each way in front of the post office, and outbound of the neighborhood, which is Court Street. Northbound, you come to a dead end because Court Street ends and you're forced to make a right turn on Bush Street and then go back onto Hamilton Avenue on your way out with all of these trucks. I mean, do you have any idea? I mean, we were calculating that the 2 Amazon sites that are smaller than this facility, in order to fill them up, they're going to need about 10,000 tractor trailers. So your site is going to probably need more than that. And then, you know, what's your turnover time going to be? You know, if you're going to be having all of these trucks coming in and out because you're going to be turning over the whole facility, you know, on a weekly basis, I mean, it's a lot of trucks, and we don't have the streets to accommodate them. And like we said, we have problems with the pollution in the neighborhood. You're going to be coming right by public housing. I mean, there are a lot of concerns. You don't show a water component at all. The city has been pushing with the EDC. You said you spoke to the EDC. You know, it would be nice if you would have had some future cranes or facilities to load and unload barges like they have right across the street on the Gowanus Canal. There's a lot of things that you could do to make us feel more comfortable. And this way we could, at least we know it's an as of right situation up to a certain point. And, you know, I just, you know, to have your site be larger than all of these, you know, all 3 of them is very concerning. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Alec, would you like me to respond?
Yes, you're welcome to.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jim. I really appreciate the questions and the specificity. So I think in no particular order, and you'll let me know if I miss anything, the size of the facility as compared to the Amazon facilities, you know, a couple of things there. The first is that I know I keep making this point, but we do think that consolidating activities in 1 building versus having 3 on the site will have an appreciable difference on the traffic and circulation in the neighborhood, and is one reason we're trying to do this. I think the second point that you made about the number of trucks, it's very difficult for us today to accurately predict a precise number of trucks because we don't have a tenant, and a lot of that depends on our business model. That said, the 10,000 truck number that you quoted is not remotely in the kind of realm of order of magnitude that we're looking at for this building. The very preliminary studies that we've done with our engineers based on trip generation and research about this building type are in the order of hundreds of trucks a day. And that's depending on the use. The building itself, while the zoning square footage is about 1 million square feet on the site, it's not 1 million square feet of warehouse space. There are other things happening in the building, including circulation, in order to make the building operate in a smoother manner. And so I really worry that that $10,000 number is taken from, you know, perhaps applying a ratio to a space that is just out of whack with what the building is actually going to be. And we, you know, I know we've said this again, and we're asking for a lot of trust from the community, but we're here in very early days. We don't have a tenant yet. We're coming to you with a request for a waiver. We're going to the BSA with a request for a waiver to improve the site plan. We know that this is a broader conversation, and we know that it's not just about us. And we also know that we need to participate in those conversations when it comes to traffic. We're trying to do that in a couple of ways. One is by making sure that our building plan is designed the best that it can be, which includes pursuing a waiver that we don't have to pursue to improve the site. The second is by doing all that we can to figure out a way to make waterfront uses work here, which is a part of the industry that, quite candidly, after New York move to freight is still in its nascency. And so we're speaking with EDC, we're speaking with the marine terminals, we're speaking with tug companies and towing companies and barging, and we're speaking with some end users who are innovative in the field, not necessarily because they're going to lease the site, but because they have experience. And truly are sincere about finding ways to incorporate that on the site, from cranes, from rows, and from organizing the building. So, and you know, from getting insight from people in the neighborhood, like the conversation that we had. So I absolutely appreciate your perspective and understand where you and everyone else on this call who's made similar points is coming from. And I just want to reiterate some of the ways that we've been thinking about that and trying to address those very real goals and concerns.
Okay,
Thank you, Emma. And thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it, especially all the specifics. James, I see you would also like to make a comment, and I don't see any other hands. So get those hands up if you want to speak as a member of the public, because then we're going to move back to a session where the public opportunity will have ended.
Posters are showing. Good evening, everyone. My name is James. I am with Councilmember Avila's office. Thanks everyone for the presentation and comments. For those of you who attended last night's CB7 last mile hearing, you probably have heard. You probably heard a lot already about how challenging it is to legislate and address the issue of last mile facilities coming to Sunset Park and Red Hook. You know, last mile facilities and logistics are booming. It's an essentially unregulated industry in the city. It's exploding. These types of uses are, you know, it's allowable under the current M31 zoning as of right. We know that these facilities are very different from the kind of land use that these districts typically entail. RXR and LBA, and for that matter, every last mile facility developer coming into Red Hook and Sunset Park, they're getting a lot of value out of these property. I hope we all know and acknowledge there is a lot of value in last mile, and that's, you know, that's why we're having this conversation. We met with them about a month ago, asked many similar questions, expressed many of the same concerns. These are environmental justice communities, Red Hook and Sunset Park, and the streets along the so-called truck route we're talking about here are, you know, schools, parks, and residential areas. You know, on the narrow question before the BSA, it's 2 buildings or it's 3 buildings. Again, this is an M31 district. This is currently allowable under the rules, which we don't think are fair. At face value, it's plausible. You know, 1 building might result in less truck idling. We don't know anything about the potential tenants, and we see how that puts us all at an informational disadvantage. So the BSA has a broad power to impose conditions on applicants. Board members can certainly vote to approve, disapprove, or approve of a project with conditions. You know, reasonable minds can disagree on the narrow question about this mapped or unmapped street, right? At face value, maybe it makes sense, but we all know that the bigger picture, there's a bigger picture here. So, you know, in any case, the board gets to submit recommendations. Among other things you might recommend in either case, this long time demand for a traffic study, you know, costs money that city agencies have been resistant to committing. You could certainly ask for that. I don't know that the BSA is gonna do that either way, but you certainly could mention it. And obviously, this is something that the council member in this office takes really seriously. That's why we've been looking at legislation. So we'll continue to engage with members of the community and these companies to make sure that we got, you know, a fair future with good jobs and climate resiliency and environmental justice. So thanks.
Thank you, James. Please thank the council member for her action on this matter. I see one last hand. Elise? And then we're going to go back to the committee session. So Elise, you should be able to unmute yourself and say your piece.
Hi, thanks. This is Elise. I'm a community member in Red Hook, and I live kind of in between 3 warehouses that are going up. And I just have a question that I need clarification on. There are a couple of times where you've said you don't need the waiver to do this. And I'm just wondering, you know, you've talked about how you're good neighbors. Do you really care about the community? You're going to be that way, whether it's 2 buildings or 3 buildings, right? So why are you here and why do you need the waiver?
Thanks, Elise. All that I was trying to say with that, and I apologize if my phrasing was sloppy, was that there's a reason that we kind of are voluntarily coming to the community and engaging in this type of conversation when no other developer has pursued something like this, which is that we think the waiver really improves the project. And we wanted an opportunity to improve the site plan and address some of the concerns, and took it upon ourselves to apply for the waiver. It's a, you know, it is a process that if we truly wanted to avoid it and build a building without any interaction, we could have done.
I thought that you said at the beginning that you were in pre-construction right now, and it's 2 buildings. So if you're in pre-construction and it's already, you're in pre-construction for 2 buildings, then improving the project is getting the waiver to make it 2 buildings, then it makes it sound like it's not voluntary, like you do need the waiver and able to continue with it being 2 buildings rather than 3.
Yeah, but Elise, I'm sorry if I was unclear. We're not in pre-construction on the second part of the project. We're in pre-construction on the first building, which is on the right, the east side of Court Street. That is, yeah. And we're going to be hiring for that and contracting for that this summer, which is really why we've been so vocal about it on this call, because we want to work with everyone here.
Okay, the last question I have, and then I promise I'll stop, is you say that you're hiring for construction this summer, but if you really want to hire people in the community, not just small businesses in the community, then you should have already started outreach and training. So it does sound a little disingenuous that you haven't already started outreach and training for that.
And my apologies. I know we have limited time, but I do want to say we have started those conversations. We acquired the site in December. We've had good initial conversations with the South Brooklyn Industrial Development Corporation and with the Red Hook Houses Tenants Association. We are very eager to speak with other groups in the community. And if you are someone that we should speak to, please put your email in the chat so we can follow up. Or, you know, I'm sure the community board would hopefully help us in making contact with you. But it's March and we completely agree. Like, this is the time to be doing it, and we're doing that now. So I really appreciate you raising that point.
Thank you, Elise, and thank you everyone from members of the public for being here today and for participating. Okay, so now we're back in the committee world, and we're going to just have are there any questions left for the applicant? Jerry, did you have a question for the applicant?
I did. It's sort of in your presentation when you showed the 3 building version versus the 2 building version. Can you explain the difference as to why you have solar panels on one, which shows the 2 building version, and no solar panels on the 3 building version? Was that done consciously to impress us?
Alec, do you want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Yeah, quite honestly, it was us being very conservative in our early conversations with solar developers. They indicated that they were most interested and thought the footprint for the larger one was the most viable, and that the footprint for each of the 2 was not something they'd be interested in moving forward with. And we typically don't like to show things we don't think we can do. But we would absolutely be looking to put solar in any building on this site.
Alec, if there are no other...
Paul indicated he has a question. So why don't we get a question from Paul, and then I'll come back to you for a likely motion.
Thank you, Alec. I just have a quick question. Either between the 2 building and 3 building scenario, if this is not granted and they do the 3 building scenario, is it safe to assume, or am I making a mistake to assume, that the unmapped street would then become a street, and perhaps has that been looked at as possible advantages or disadvantages, not to the developer, but to the community in accessing part of that site, whether it's to the waterfront or the 2 buildings that do become built on either side of that currently unmapped street? Will that, in other words, if it's a 3 building scenario, will there be a street where there is currently an unmapped street? Thank you.
Great, thanks, Paul. I'll turn to Melanie in a moment to talk about the land use specifics here, but in the 3 building scenario, that will remain a privately owned street owned by us, and will functionally be a driveways serving the adjacent two buildings. So the city is not going to build out the street. The city is not going to take title to the street. It is not going to be a public street. Melanie, is there any specific nuance there that the board should know that I did not mention?
That's exactly it. It would remain in the ownership of the RXR LBA entity, and it would be used privately for their operations.
Okay. So, Jerry, do you have a motion?
I think I do, and we'll see if I do, what the committee thinks. I think we have to make clear that the three building scenario is as of right. And we are only voting on eliminating and demapping and giving them permission to build within the non-existent street, thus making this a two-building project. We are not here to approve two buildings or three buildings. Our role tonight is only to allow them to build on what is considered on an old city map an extension of Clinton Street. So this project as a three-building project is as of right. So our role is very limited, unfortunately. The motion is to recommend to BSA on the two specific items. I will let the office fill in, I think it's General Law 35 and Section 7201G of, if I'm not mistaken, of the zoning code. The board recommends not to grant the request to the applicant to build within the street bed of the extension of Clinton Street. Plain and simple, no conditions.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Maddie. So that is on the floor. Do we have discussion on the motion? Mark? Mark, you're muted. There you are.
Yeah, I might as well be muted because I know I'm going to lose on this. I really feel that what we're saying is we really don't like these kind of facilities, and anybody who asks for something with regard to one of these facilities should be denied because we don't like them. And that has nothing to do with the nature of whether or not the project is better with two or three buildings. I would have loved to have a motion that called for conditions that would help the community, that incorporate all the things they say they're promising, but which
can't.
Which we don't know. Well, we can ask, but you know, you're going to win anyway, Jerry. So let me say it. So we could put in our requests, our conditions, our thoughts about all of these things to make sure that they understand that their promises are promises to be kept to the community. But an absolute no, I won't vote for an absolute no, although I know that it will pass overwhelming.
Well, after your eloquent statement, Mark, I wouldn't be so sure, but let's hear from the whole committee. Pauline?
I am with Jerry's motion. I think what the applicant is doing to us as a community board and to the people of Red Hook is to dangle these carrots before us, telling us exactly what they can do for us in providing jobs and all these things, but not looking at the impact that the end product will have on the community, quality of life in the community, what our young people will suffer as the asthma rate increases. And I think it's time that we look at a project, not because we think it's good, but because of what it is for the community. Is it good for the community, not only with providing jobs, because most of them don't provide the jobs they say they're going to provide, And even if they provide the jobs, they're short-term. They don't keep those people for a long time. They're still employed 8 or 9 months after those projects have been completed, and they're left exactly where they are in the confines of Red Hook.
Thank you, Pauline. Okay, Ariel?
Sorry, my question is about the main point about having the one building over 2 buildings to the west of Court Street was ease of efficiency in the construction and building, and that might be for a very, very large warehouse, but they would otherwise be 2 large buildings. But also about what concerned me, and I think other people brought this up, in the fact that we don't see a traffic study, so we don't really know what it means. But you have basically, you got everything south of Bryant Street, so there's no reason you can't, if you really care the way you say you care, you couldn't accommodate all of the trucks that you plan to have within your site. So I don't understand that as an argument. Maybe you could elaborate on that. Because that was a main part of your argument, and yet I keep looking at the map and thinking, well, you have the entire site, so you can keep all of the trucks because you should know how many trucks you might have. And then, the issue of simply not knowing what is going into these buildings is a huge concern. And the third thing is that we're in the midst now of trying to figure out how to regulate. So I feel as if this, I'm not convinced that a much huger single building is a benefit to us, or to us. I mean, obviously it's a benefit to the developer.
Thank you, Ariel. I'm going to just keep going through members of the committee for comment on the motion. Allison?
Thanks, Alec. Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, this is partially in response to what Mark had said, which, I understand his comments, but even if we were to look at just the very narrow, approval that they're asking for, they've given us literally no information to make this decision. I mean, we don't know what the truck traffic would be or what the truck patterns would be for one plan versus the other. So, how can I can't support this for many reasons, but also, mainly because, or not mainly, but, one reason is because they've given us like little to no information on what the actual difference is between the 2 proposals that they're presenting us with. So that's my comment.
Bob?
Okay, I understand what Jerry's saying, and that we don't have a choice, that it could be just the way it is. No, but I think this is a chance for us to tell them that what we want, and I think I would like to see what Jerry said, and then have, unless there is waterfront access provided the way it would be at the Gowanus Canal, where that you're expected any building to build, or because I'm not sure which one we should do, is that a building built so that waterfront access can be used for shipping right from the beginning, because you're not going to get a tenant in unless it's set up for it. And I think if you want an okay from us, and you want to say that you don't have trucking coming in, and you really want to keep it down to a minimum, then set it up so that you will have that option, that a barge can come instead. That's all. So I would love to see, and I would love to vote yes for it if there's some options provided, or conditions provided, whatever you want to call them.
Glenn?
I'm voting with Mark on this because our role is very narrow. We're only considering whether it makes sense logistically to have 1 building rather than 2. And while I sympathize and understand everybody's concerned about these warehouses, it's gonna get built. And we have a very small role here to perhaps make it a little bit better for the community. And we have no role in deciding what the building looks like, which tenants are going to be in there, how the building is going to be used. That's not our job. We don't have a role in that. So I think we're coloring outside the lines here with that motion.
Understood. Okay. Bob, I'm going to assume your hand is still up unintentionally. And Allison, I think you re-raised your hand.
Yes. Oh, are you letting me speak now?
Yes, yes, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
yeah. So no, I just want to respond again. I mean, I understand that this is a very, technically this is a very narrow purview that we have that we're reviewing here. But again, I want to say they've given us no information to make that choice, to make that decision. I mean, Bob was saying that, or Glenn was saying that, we're here to choose between, whether one building is better than two buildings. I mean, was there anything that they said that like told you which one is actually better and in what way and with any level of specificity or detail? I mean, no, I didn't hear anything. So, I mean, I just think, I think like someone else said earlier, they're sort of presenting a little bit of a straw man and just saying that these are the two options, pick one. And we're given no information and no specifics and no details, no traffic studies, no nothing. So I just, I get, I applaud them for all of their, corporate citizenship, efforts that they make and everything. But I don't think this is a good project for Red Hook. And I don't think that, that they've given us enough information to make a decision which option is preferable. So I'm going to vote no.
That is, you're going to vote yes on Jerry's motion. Yes. Okay.
Yes, right.
Just want to make sure as we get closer to the motion that everybody understands what the motion is. Okay. Glenn, did you want to respond further to that?
No, I will take my hand down.
Okay. So Jerry, I think the floor might be yours. You got one request from Bob for a friendly amendment, but it was sort of in the way of, I would rather see a different kind of motion. It was more in the spirit, I think, of Mark's comment. So I don't know whether you're going to attempt a conditioned friendly amendment or just charge on and we can vote.
I will not do a condition, an amendment, a friendly amendment or on this. I don't think, Bob, I can't see how we could do that. And in reference to what Glenn said, yes, and I was very clear, we're not voting on the existence of this building or these buildings. We're voting on the demap, not the demapping, allowing them to build on a city street. And as Allison pointed out, they did not provide us with anything that would show that a two-building scenario would make more sense than a three-building scenario. And I think that's the important thing. It's a matter of convenience for this developer to have two buildings instead of three. It makes their logistics, their renting, and their profitability much better. And in reference, since this is not the first one, it's the last one that we're seeing in Red Hook. It may not be the last. It's the last as of right now. I think that we have to say to our elected officials, we can do what we can do. It's now up to you. And this is one way to get our point across. They have to do something. Our role is just on that little piece of Clinton's, the extension of Clinton Street.
Thank you, Jerry. So I would like to move to a vote. I'd like to, we have a long meeting here. Ariel, I see your hand is up. What is it that you want to say?
Well, is it too late to ask a question of RXR?
I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is. I think
my concern is just that the difference between the actual size of the building and that I don't know if this gets back to what had been asked before, but they kept saying the use doesn't change, but with a considerably bigger building, it's potentially true that it would be a different type of a site. And that's the one thing that I don't know.
So my understanding for their application was that the buildable area does not change in the
buildable area doesn't, but the fact that they have a huge floor plate might change what they do and how they're used.
I think that they answered that question in the way of it might change the number of tenants but it is not going to change the likely last mile use, which is the intended use of this site, some kind of logistics facility. Okay, let's do a vote. Because we have 2 more applications tonight. And so what we're going to do is, Jerry has a motion. This is a motion to just add no comment and to disapprove the request. If you would like to vote for the motion, which is voting against the application, please use the raise hand function, or Pauline, I know you're on the phone, so you can say so, over the phone.
I'm voting for Jerry's motion.
Okay. So that's 7. And by the way, we gained quorum during the meeting for anybody who's concerned. Okay, if you're voting against, everybody hands down. If you're voting against this motion, please use the raise hand function. Bob, Van, Mark, Glenn, and Paul.
I think Bob voted twice.
Yes, not Bob. He just took a moment to get his hand down.
I'm pushing mute. It's not going. Yeah, my hand was up for the first part of it.
Understood. Thank you. And I got it. And are there any abstentions?
Hands down.
Okay. So the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the applicant for all the time this evening and for the pre-meeting before this. We do appreciate the staffing and attention to this. And despite today's result, this will go to the full board with a recommendation where the result may change. And in any event, good luck.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And okay, our next application.
I do have a hand up.
Okay, Bob, what's up?
Yeah, I will withdraw this if you don't think it belongs, but I would like to see a letter going out for the powers to be, a local reps and City Hall or whatever needs to be put on, that anything being done, any shipping, anything being built in Red Hook or along the waterfront should include waterfront access in future planning.
You mean
another 2 hours discussion, so I understand if you don't want to do it now, but if you think it'll go through quickly,
You mean the ability to do waterfront?
Alec, it's Mike. We sent like 7 letters along those lines, and I included them in today's newsletter.
On record for doing that.
Yeah, no, Bob, we're already on the record for that, and I think Jim Timpakis is here, someone that we've been in discussions.
I think you have to realize that New York City zoning rules also contain a waterfront access section that all development on the waterfront has to comply with, which is why we have the walkway along the Gowanus, which is why we have.
I think he doesn't mean waterfront access in that way, Jerry. I don't think he's talking about walking the waterfront, but I do take the point. I'm sorry to cut you off. I want to move this along. I agree with Mike that we have actually been on the record repeatedly and recently.
So that's fine. I'll withdraw it as a motion.
I appreciate it. Okay, so we have 2 more applications tonight. I do not know whether they will merit as much discussion, but let's find out. The first application is 188 Prospect Park West, which I believe is the Nighthawk. And the applicant's here, and we would appreciate your concise presentation on the application. Whenever you're ready.
Angel, you're muted.
Yeah, Angel, I think you're on mute still.
I think you're unmuted now. We can
Yes,
probably
I
hear you.
am.
Great.
All right. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. My name is Angel Ayon. I'm the principal of Ayon Studio Architecture and Preservation. And with me is Ali Shivi from Ayon Studio as well. You are correct. We're here to present work that is being proposed at the Nighthawk at 188 Prospect Park West, as the building is known today. You know that the building is just right on the corner of 14th Street and Prospect Park West. It's just across the street, the Park Slope Historic District, and within the boundaries of the district extension. The building it's visible from pretty much across the park, but also from the Bartle Pritchard Square roundabout. This is a presentation that we're taking to landmarks at public hearing, because what we are presenting is actually really visible from the public way. This is a historic photo of the building from the 1920s. As you know, this is the original Sanders Theater built in 1928. The building really has remained in its pretty much original configuration over the years, pretty much being the larger, taller building on that corner with a smaller one-story building to the left, right facing the roundabout. That has been the configuration that has been in place for decades. Building was vacant until 2017 or so, and at that time, that's when the building was purchased by our client, and then has been since then converted to the Nighthawk. Before that, the Landmarks Commission considered multiple options, but approved an intervention on the building where a lot of new construction was visible from the street, both from the north facade and also from the south facade, as I'm showing here. So there's a precedent of the commission approving significant alterations to this building. That did not go through, and the building was actually not altered to that extent. The commission, however, approved two alterations to the building. One during the 2018 conversion. One was the extension of an existing shaft to create an elevator shaft on the left-hand side where that blue arrow is. And they also approved the installation of a new marquee, which is the marquee that it's been there since the Nighthawk opened with the Nighthawk lettering. I will take this opportunity to point out how visible the south roof is from the street. You cannot miss it. And this is a very utilitarian low slope roof that is a modified bitumen roofing. There is no slate, there is no copper, there's no sheet metal, there is no significant historic fabric in this roof at all. This is the current condition. We are still working at the building. Some of the work that was planned for the conversion was not implemented at that time, and we've been working on it as we speak. Knowing that the scaffold will be going up at the end of the year and will be up throughout the summer, the spring, we took some of the photographs that we're going to be presenting to you were taken in the summer. This is a view of the existing roof. As you can tell, I'm on the former Fly House looking east towards Prospect Park, and you can tell that the building has a segmented roof, has 1, 2, 3, and 4 sections. That south-facing face is the one that you can see very well from the street. On the right-hand side is just a photograph of the roof looking in the opposite direction, looking west. What we are proposing here is to install a photovoltaic array on the roof, pretty much following the slope of the existing roof. The existing roof is going to be replaced, and the new photovoltaic is just going to be installed following literally the exact the same slope of the existing roof. So we're taking advantage of this almost south exposure of the building of the the southernmost half of the building roof, which is pretty much facing south, and we're also taking advantage of this low slope northern part. It's not as efficient, but it would allow us to compensate for the reduced installation that we're putting here. So in essence, what we're proposing is just to install rooftop photovoltaics that will be visible from the street. These are our facades. As you know, landmarks require us to prepare existing and proposed elevation to determine whether the change is visible. It is not visible from the north facade, from the Prospect Park West facade. We can show you the outline of the building that pretty much shows where this 1, 2, 3 photovoltaic arrays will be installed on top of the existing building following the slope of the buildings. These are our building elevations. This is the one on 14th Street, existing and proposed. You'll barely see some of what will be installed on the north-facing low slope side of the building. And here's the facade facing south, where you will be seeing most of the panels that are going to be facing south. Building sections showing those 3 arrangements looking east and west. A typical installation detail, the building has a concrete deck. We have to replace the roof and comply with the energy conservation code and add at least 5 or 6 inches of insulation. We need to kind of lift that photovoltaic a little bit to install the anchors, but also to allow for flashing of that assembly into the new roof. But the top of the panels are not going to be more than 10.25 inch above the actual finished roof. So we're trying to stay as low as possible and again, parallel to the existing surface. These are samples of the photovoltaic panels that are being installed elsewhere in Brooklyn, but it's the same system, the same cell system that is going to be installed at the Nighthawk, and it's the same color, different installation detail, but will give you a better sense of what type of panels we're considering. And here are a series of views that I'm going to be showing you from different perspectives to show the visibility of what is being proposed from different vantage points. Again, if you stand in front of the building on Prospect Park West, you won't see anything because there is a parapet there that is tall enough to hide whatever is happening on the rear, on the roof. Here's a view from the street, pretty much from that roundabout that shows the existing roof, but it's very, very visible. And also the proposed solution where you can see the rooftop photovoltaic visible from the thoroughfare. Here's another view from a similar location showing the existing low slope roof that is visible from the street and the photovoltaic insulation that will be installed on it. Landmarks was very concerned about finding the spot that shows maximum visibility. So we went across, and here's one place where we can see the building from further out, and you can see more of that roof. You don't see all of it because there's a tree in the middle, but this is pretty much as far as you can go to pretty much see that roof. Again, you only see the pitch area of the southernmost roof, the one with the larger pitch, the one with the low pitch, you can barely see it. You cannot see it from the street at all. And here's the proposed arrangement that will be visible from the street. This is the current condition on the left. We have scaffolding, and the work has been going on that facade for a while. So we have taken this photograph and created a render of, as Landmark requested, of kind of maximum visibility showing the actual photovoltaic array that will be the way it will be installed, and with a restored south facade that we are currently working on. And the existing, the restoration of the facade, the painting of the signage and all that is already being approved by Landmarks at staff level, and it's not being presented here, but the actual rooftop installation is what we're going to be presenting at public hearing. And if you see, if you walk on Prospect Park West, a little bit further north, and you turn around, you'll see that there's a sliver of that edge of the roof that is visible if you can find the right spot. And if you look at the building from there, there will be the edge of that photovoltaic panel that will be visible from that vantage point. And that is the presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Angel. Glenn?
Yeah, I find this unobjectionable. seems like a no-brainer to me. I take more issue with the billboards on the side of the building, but we're not voting on that.
That's true. Can you close the presentation, please? Thank you. And we can fire it up if we need it. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, Paul?
Thank you, Alec. You don't show it in the rendering, but will you be required to add railings or raise that parapet for safety to have height, since more people will be accessing the perimeter and closer to the edge of the building?
No, there's a gutter there and the parapet height is sufficient.
Okay, Jerry?
I happen to agree totally with Glenn. I think that it's absolutely unobjectionable, and I think it's something that will fit in and eventually will become unnoticed by the community. I would have liked to see the parapet wall raised by a foot or two, which would make it 150% perfect, but I'll take 100% perfect.
Bob?
As I say, Jerry, raising the parapet might put a shadow on the panels, which would be no good either. You showed us an example of the similar panels being used on a roof. Is that in size or is that on the same angle? In other words, of those panels as flat as what you're going to be doing? That's the first question.
Those panels are installed on a flat roof. So if you look at them, that's a flat roof, and they're trying to figure out how to get a little bit of inclination for those panels. Therefore, what you saw were several panels that have been, each of them tilted a little bit to gain some inclination. So in that sense, no, that's not what we're doing. We're just doing panels that are flat and parallel to the existing
roof itself is
roof slope. Right. We were presenting those because those are the type of panels that
okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that made sense.
Yeah, but we're not saying that. We're not doing that kind of scaly installation. The intent is just to have a flat panel.
All right. Now, this is a little bit pushy, but in the vein of all the building all over the place that are asked to do amenities, whether it's a subway entrance or community improvements, the granite block that's in the middle of that circle was just knocked down by a car crash last week or the week before. Would it be possible to maybe pay for a new one?
I will be happy to pass on the question to my client and see what he says about that.
Okay.
Bob, that's no extortion tonight, although of course that would be a wonderful contribution to the community.
It's typical that buildings put in, and that's why I brought it in. I mean, you go to one where they take care of the subway station and things like that. So
I'm sure my client will probably suggest somebody else pay for it. He'll give this person a free movie ticket. So
Bob, we'll shake down somebody who wants to do something worse than solar
I was
panels.
going to say do it
Okay?
after we vote. It's not going to stop my vote either way they're doing it.
All right. All right. This is recorded, you know. Ty?
Yeah, a little bit of a first here for me in my 7 years working at CB6. I'm actually going to ask a question as a member of the community because I'm the treasurer of the neighboring co-op at 186 PPW. And I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that the maximum height above the roof for the panels would be about 10 3/4 inches. If I want to know, particularly on the north facade, is there any chance that during installation or construction that in fact those would have to be elevated in any other way, because then it would affect my building's light and air, and particularly my apartment specifically? So anything you can say to that would be really appreciated.
well, as you know, we're going to landmarks at public hearing, and you've probably seen those certificate of appropriateness that are issued by LPC that very clearly says that the work is approved as presented. And if anything were to change, they put the burden on us, the applicant on record, to present it back to the commission and have it approved. So once it's approved at public hearing one way, if it's not to be that way, then we will have to come back here and present it. And of course, the commission would always have the prerogative to issue violations and so on, and enforce any corrective work if need be. But I don't anticipate any of this. We have been working with the client, the owner, during the conversion, implementing facade repairs. We've detailed this roof system very carefully, working with the vendor who's providing the panels and installing them, their engineers. And there's been there could have been many other ways in which this system could have been installed. And the way the installation detail that has been proposed is one that is not ideal. It has tons of penetrations on a roof membrane, but it's one that allows us to keep those panels just as close to the roof as possible so that they are less bulky and less visible and minimize any impact. So no, the detail that we show, it's pretty much what I anticipate would happen. We're going to need 6 inches for flashing, and above that, then you're going to have the panel. So I don't anticipate that would be an issue.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Glenn,
I was going to make a motion unless Jerry's got a question.
okay, make a motion, please.
I would like to make a motion to approve the application as presented.
Bob
Second.
seconded.
Second.
Okay, you were beat to the punch, Jerry. All right,
No,
so
that's okay.
let's do a vote, unless there's discussion on the motion, and I hope there isn't. So please raise your hand if you are against this motion.
Hi, and Jerry, put your hands down.
Michelle in the chat, this is a vote to approve the application as presented. In other words, they want to put the photovoltaic cells on there. We're saying yes. And it looks like we are saying yes unanimously, unless someone is abstaining. Are you abstaining? Anyone? Okay. Thank you very much, Angel.
I don't see Mark.
I resisted the urge to get Ty's apartment painted.
That will be for the next application. Okay. And we finally have 19 Tompkins Place.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We finally have 19 Tompkins Place, which is another landmark application. And is the applicant here? Matt, is that you?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, wonderful. Let's do it.
Hi.
If you don't have a quorum call, you assume there's a quorum.
Sorry, what was that?
You're not muted, Jeremy, but Jerry, but I'm just going to pretend I didn't hear anything you just said. Okay. Matt, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Matthew Ransom. I'm the design director of architecture, overhead architecture DPC, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ben Hutchberg. And we're here today to present the rear horizontal enlargement of a residential building at 19 Tompkins Place in Cobble Hill. So give me just a moment and I will pull this up. Can everyone see this okay?
Yep, you can just go right ahead.
Great, thank you. So it might be surprising, but these 3 photos actually depict the same building. So here we have 19 Tompkins Place in the tax photo from 1940. Here's the front facade as it exists today. Part of our application involves removing the fire escape and doing a little bit of remedial work. But what we are talking about today is, of course, this thing at the rear. And you might be surprised, this is actually the rear of the building here at the front. So there is an existing extension built in 1997 at the back of this building. We are proposing the removal of this extension in a small enlargement beyond the extent of this extension as it exists now. Here we've got a site plan, and I know it's a little bit small. I've got a zoomed in detail that we'll get to in a little bit, but purpose of this slide is just to make the case that the block of 19 Tompkins is very heterogeneous. So we've got a long commercial street here. So we've got a mix of, there's a synagogue with a community facility. We've got commercial use types here. And then a row of row houses here. You can see in the legend, the colors indicate the various heights of the rear extensions. 19 Tompkins is here. This is the existing condition, right? So in yellow, you can just barely see the two-story extension, and then there's a small deck off to the side. The green color indicates one-story extensions, and then the blue is 3 stories. So you can see already that there's precedent for these rear enlargements on the block. And you can also see that they're, it's fairly heterogeneous, right? There's a wide variety in terms of their depth, their height, their shape, their overall aspect. Here you can see, and again, I apologize, it's a little bit small. We'll have a detail of this in just a second, but here you can see the proposed enlargement. So we're extending it by 7 feet, and we're making we're extending to align with the width of the building, right? So it's a full width 2-story extension. Here we've got a Google Earth view just to put a finer point on some of the existing extensions. So we can see here are one of our immediate neighbors at 15 Tompkins. There's a 3-story full width extension, just 2 doors down. And then 3 doors down at 25 Tompkins, we've got a 3-story, again, full width extension going in. Oh, sorry, Robert, you raise your hand.
I'll cast the call me if he wants to.
Yeah, Bob, what's
Okay.
your question?
You said the extension 7 feet. Is that it past the extension that's there, or is the total amount is 7 feet?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. It's beyond the existing extension, and we'll see that. We'll have a comparative analysis in just a second. That'll be clear in just a moment.
Okay.
So let me just keep moving where we've got images that speak to that. So this is just to give you an idea of the rear landscape. So, I spoke about how the block itself is very, very heterogeneous. The interior of the block is exactly that as well, right? So you've got a wide variety of extensions that exist here. So we're looking from left to right, standing at the rear of the yard. So on the left here, this is 25 Tompkins. This is the 3-story full width extension. And then as we kind of pan to the right, we have before us here at the center, 19 Tompkins, right? So when I say that it's coming 7 feet per out of the existing extension, we're actually coming no further than this deck that's cantilevered off the side of the building now. And then if you turn your gaze to the right, you can see 2 doors down, 15 Tompkins, which is the 3-story tall full width extension. Standing here at the deck, you can see that heterogeneity again. There's the commercial abutment there. Just gonna keep going. And so what are we actually proposing? So like I said, we're proposing a full width 2-story extension, right? We're extending beyond the existing footprint of the extension by 7 feet. So here at the top of the image is the existing site plan. You can see there was the existing uses. It's a 9-foot extension. There's a kitchen inside, a small skylight, and then there's a large deck that finds its way all the way back to about the center of the rear yard. And it is a very deep lot. You can see here that there's from the existing extension, there's about 52 feet. And with our proposed extension, we still maintain a very deep rear yard. We've got about 45 feet after the proposed extension. And so the idea here, and I'll get into this in a little bit more detail in just a moment, but the idea is basically just to bring this extension, just to fold it into the house. So it's part and parcel of the house itself. And so you'll see in the elevations in just a moment, the way in which we're doing that. But we envision this as truly an extension of the house rather than some sort of agglomeration. And what does that look like with respect to the block? It looks like this. So we're maintaining, again, we're in keeping with the heterogeneity of the donut. And I should also mention that this is not visible from the street. So here we can see in a little bit more detail that first image that I started with. Again, the colors denote the various heights of the neighboring extensions, with blue being 3-story, yellow being 2-story, and green is a 1-story. So you can see here, we're just about even. We're about 3 feet shy of the extension at 25, which we saw in the photos just a moment ago. And then we're coming out by about 2.5, 3 feet relative to the 3-story extension 2 doors down at 15 Tompkins. And again, we're a story shorter. Here, and we'll see these two side by side in just a moment, but here is a section through the existing building. So this is the extension, and we're proposing the full removal of the extension. You can see here that there's an excavated patio area and then a long wood deck that finds its way deep into the yard. I should also mention that there's a cut line here, right? So the yard is actually much deeper, and you'll see the full site section in just a moment. And then here's what's being proposed. And again, we envision this truly as an extension of the house itself. So the idea is that, with all the sort of design choices and so forth that we make in devising this extension, the intent is for it all to be in keeping with the nature of the house. It's a Greek revival house, so there's some homages to that we'll look at in just a second. But more to the point, it's about kind of folding this thing into the house so that the house itself can then in turn be folded back into the fabric of the block in the neighborhood at large. These two things side by side, you can see up here at the top, this is the existing extension. As I said, it's about 9 feet deep. And then the proposed extension is 16 feet 4 inches. Beyond that, we're proposing a small recessed patio area, and then a much smaller, it's a stair with a landing right off the patio door there, right? And you can see already between these two images that the impact of just removing simply this deck, right? The deck as it exists now is 19 feet beyond the face of that extension, right? So our feeling is that by removing by removing this and providing a much more discrete, kind of simplified point of access down to the rear yard, it's essentially just about the extension itself, right? And again, we envision this extension is truthfully just an extension of the house. It's part and parcel of the existing building that's been there for well over 100 years. Beyond that, the other thing I want to mention is that, if we're looking at the shape of the donut, as I mentioned, it's a very deep lot. So even with the additional 7 feet that I mentioned, we've got about 45 feet of rear yard to work with. Looking at the existing elevations, so here right in the center, this is 19 Tompkins, and you might notice off the right side, this is the 3-story full width extension that's actually under construction right now. So again, this is the partial width extension that exists now, and you can see the proposed here. So we are maintaining roughly the same height as what exists now. We're expanding it to be full width of the building, and we're extending it by several feet. We've got a small railing across the parapet that's got a detail that kind of gathers the gutter here. It's kind of all one contiguous piece. Downspout, get the idea. I should also mention that here we're standing in the yard. The building continues beyond, right, because of the recessed patio, which we'll see the full elevation here in this image, right? So on the left side, we've got the existing to be removed and then the proposed. And as I mentioned, the intent with this is to bring some level of historical appropriateness to the rear facade and to the interior environment of this block, right? So this is a Greek revival house. We're making some kind of simple moves, some sort of abstract moves to pay homage to that. And again, it's just about kind of enfolding the extension so that it feels inevitable. It feels like part and parcel of the house itself, which I've mentioned. And then in terms of how this materializes, the intent is to materialize it in a way that lets it kind of recede into the block, right? So we're looking at using fair colors like earth tone stucco colors. What we're proposing here is an off-white stucco color, and the extension and the building itself would be treated in just the same way. The windows pay homage to the deep green color that we saw at the front. It's a slightly desaturated green, and it's a contrasting element. The railing here, in an attempt to kind of dial down its presence, we're planning to paint the same color as the stucco, so it sort of recedes into the background rather. And then here you don't quite see it. It was in the last image. This stair that I mentioned is accessed from this patio door here, right? So it's a 3-foot landing, the stair just immediately out from this door. And then in terms of like how this is materialized, it's just the facade itself is a contrasting element, and then all of the kind of massive elements are treated with just the same color. The intent of just getting this to better blend into the block. And that's what we have.
Thank you. Jerry.
Can we go back to okay, perfect. I just want some clarification before I say something.
Sure.
The roof. Can we go with these 4 structures on the existing?
Yes, so thank you for calling that out. So we are proposing, there's 2 skylights that we're introducing and then a roof monitor, none of which will be visible from the street. So LPC have asked this, that's part of the staff level review at LPC, and what's germane to this hearing is the extension itself. But I'm happy to answer the question. This is a monitor because it's sort of an attic space there. There's a pop-up there to make this habitable space.
Well, I guess I'm the only person who lives in Cobble Hill, a block away from this.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. I
Oh,
live on
interesting.
Strong Place. I own a house on Strong Place. I know the block well. I really, with the exception of the railing being the same color as the stucco, and the fact that we have in your diagram and your pictures, we have quite a few extensions already of varying sizes and shapes and heights. Considering some of the extensions we've seen in the past, this is fine. The separation between the basement apartment and the parlor floor is clear. You can see a separation. And the only question I have is, you seem to be changing the windows on the second floor where the deck is.
That's correct. So there's a patio over the extension. So we're dropping the sills. So you can see on the left side here is the demolition elevation, right? So we're dropping the sills there to make these operable patio doors out to a walkout terrace.
I mean, considering, as I said, considering some of the extensions we've seen, I find this one some of the least objectionable ones we've seen.
Appreciate that.
Glenn?
I promised to pass along a comment from a neighbor. I had occasion to speak with Roy Sloan, a friend, a longtime member of this committee and of the Cobble Hill Association, and with Jerry, our voice from Cobble Hill on these issues. And he spoke with a friend who lives across the street who felt, and I will read his words, that the extension at 19 Tompkins Place is totally inappropriate and out of place and not in conformity with the visual beauty of the streetscape. I don't happen to agree with that, but I did promise to pass the information along, and I just want to point out that this gentleman does not live next to this house, but across the street, and I expect then would not be looking at this if I understand his address is what, 18?
Yeah, if he's on an even
18 Tompkins, yeah.
If he's across the street, it's totally non-visible. So you have to be invited in by another neighbor.
Still, I wanted to fulfill my my promise to toss that into the mix. I agree with Jerry on the railing. I think I agree with Jerry. You were concerned about the color of that railing. We are always pretty determined to see it painted black like all the other railings. And I also wanted to point out that
I think that's Pauline's picking it up on the phone.
Yeah, I think she's muted again. So Glenn, just go ahead.
Okay.
Pauline, if you want to talk though, you pipe up after Glenn finishes.
So I'm looking at page 17 of your application, and on there, there's a detailed picture of the rear stair, and it says material metal, color to match windows, image to demonstrate intended presence of stair and railing. Image does not represent intended color or design. I would be horrified if this turns into some stainless steel wire contraption. I think it's important that we maintain the type of railing that is, on all of these houses, the wrought iron painted black, just like the neighbors.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it is, I take your point about the rear stair photo here. It's a little bit confusing to put such a caveat here, but for whatever we do, it will be in keeping with, at least in terms of the way that it's structured, in keeping with what you see here. The intent is not to flip the script with what we use for the stair, right? It will all be of a piece. And that piece will be as simple as can be. We're going to use, it's going to be small square stock steel, built in just the same way as I'm sure you've seen all around the neighborhood. But then with respect to the color, the intent is not to reinvent the wheel here. It's just to lighten it slightly, just to get it to recede a little bit better. But I take your point. You know, we don't necessarily need to you know, to opine or kind of enter into this conversation about railings in this on the block, right? If we're not doing anything beyond just introducing something that's just effectively like a wrought iron railing, then why bother changing the color beyond black? And for us, it's really just about just sapping its presence down slightly, to just make this visually feel a little bit shorter, just basically to kind of like attenuate the impact of the building itself.
It makes sense. I understand your intention, and yeah, I get that, but I think it's more important that we try to maintain some continuity from building to building. I'm looking at page 15, line drawings of 4 buildings, yours among them, and they all appear to have the same type of railing. I would, you know, it's probably going to be part of the motion that this match the other railings and be painted to match the other railings.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Yeah, I have a question that you keep mentioning the historic look and that you're trying to match. Well, any of the other extensions, I don't see it on these that you're showing, either T porches or bay, if configured as a bay.
Can I jump to the site plan, because that will help illustrate this?
They all were squared off, but I don't know if, you know, I didn't do details.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, there's a bay, but these are quite different. This is an apartment building. So in terms of the townhouses nearby, they're all squared off, as you say.
Okay. All right. It seemed to be that way. I just wanted to double check. That's all.
Jerry?
Thank you.
Jerry, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Do we have anyone from the community who would like to say something before I?
Good question.
If not,
speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, Jerry.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we conditionally approve with the condition is that the railing on the extension, on the top of the extension, be simple wrought iron painted black, and that the stairway and railing for the stairs going down from the parlor floor to the backyard reflect, also be plain, simple wrought iron painted black. That we understand the desire to have it blend in, but that's not the point. It has to match, it should match what's happening in Cobble Hill. And in that district, all the back extensions are black. They're not muted, they're not this, they're not that, they're there. The railings are there, and that's the motion.
And I will second it.
Okay. And is there any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any discussion. Why don't we have a vote? So I'm going to ask that you use the raise hand function or make a lot of noise if you are against this motion. And are there any abstentions? Well, that would seem to indicate that the motion, Jerry's motion, is approved unanimously. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you all.
And thank you, everyone, for the committee. I know it's been a long night, but you know, we've had longer. So I'll see you all at the full board meeting shortly. Does anyone have any new business or anything they want to bring up before we gavel out?
Motion to adjourn.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Thank
Good
you.
night,
everybody.
folks. Be well.
See you around the neighborhood.
Thank you again. Bye.
Okay.